Following the massive success of Resident Evil 1 through 3 and Capcom's 2002 Remake, the Resident Evil series was at a pinnacle no other franchise in gaming had reached up to that point. As the top IP in the horror market, Shinji Mikami & Co. could experiment with each title and face little economic consequence, leading to constant evolution within the series from game to game. While each was unique, they were ultimately still horror games with a fixed camera system, finite in-game resources, and intense challenge. However, this generally limited experimental approach took a drastic turn with Resident Evil 4, shifting from a fixed camera to a third-person tracking lens and taking a heavier leaning on action over purely horror and survival. Among the 8 mainline RE games, it's hard to find a ranking or tier list that doesn't have Resident Evil 4 as the best in the series. Following that, I'm sure you're wondering what my order is, and I have to admit that I had a more enjoyable experience with the RE2 remake than I did RE4, but it's still in my top 10 favorite games. Resident Evil 4's fluid combat system, movement, and control scheme sparked a revolution in the design approach of video games from 2005 onwards, and in my opinion, it's quite possibly the most important game of the 21st century in that regard. As one of Resident Evil's best games, the story is fantastic, the gameplay wonderful, and the bosses plentiful. Before we begin, it's worth noting that I played Resident Evil 4 on normal difficulty using a variety of weapons, but not the rocket launcher, as I felt it would be unfair to judge a boss using a mechanic designed around skipping them altogether. As well, make sure to check out our Discord and Patreon, and thank you so much to our patrons for their constant support. Resident Evil 4 is, once again, one of my favorite games ever, and its boss fights were a major reason why I enjoyed the game as much as I did. How do they rank? Let's find out. Whenever we began writing a script, we start at the bottom with the worst boss, logically. When I'm the one scripting it, I always like to ask myself a set of questions to base my general mood I want to convey. For example, what was I feeling when I fought that boss? Why was I feeling what I felt? What did the boss do that made it unenjoyable? Was it even that bad, or was I just hungry, tired, or doing it incorrectly? Well, I usually ask myself those questions, I should say. As with Verdugo, there was no need. Plain and simply, he just has a shit fucking design. The Castellan's right-hand bug ends the longest chapter in the game, 4-1, with one of the most infuriating boss fights in the entire Resident Evil series. Do you like 15 to 20 repetitive quick times with the same animation as you walk down an endless hallway? Yeah, I don't either, and if you do, then great. Get checked out at a psych ward, you sick fuck. The two Verdugos, or executioners in English, were Castellan Salazar's bodyguards, created by Los Iluminados through a fusion of human and insect DNA controlled by Las Plagas. That's the lore for like every boss in this game also, so don't expect anything crazy on that front. Anyways, the red-cloaked Verdugo you fight in the sewers starts off as a randomly occurring dodge quick time as recently mentioned, a drive-by tail here and a swipe from the ceiling there, nothing more. Then, once you reach the back room and unlock the elevator, the now fully derobed bug drops into the tight corridor to take out Leon for good. To quickly summarize, Verdugo is so fucking fast that your only solution to avoid it is to do absolutely nothing at all. There is no escape. Well, there are the liquid nitrogen canisters that freeze him, but they only work for about 5 seconds, and afterwards he'll get right back up and stick his pincers up your fucking asshole like nothing's even happened. For how unavoidable and quick Verdugo is, his damage output is absurdly unbalanced, and on the other side of that, he is practically unkillable, with a literally unknown amount of health. It is apparently possible to kill him with guns, but I tried for about 7 minutes to no avail, so take what you will from that. As I said in the introduction, I refuse to use the rocket launcher on major boss encounters as it kind of defeats the point of me making rankings based on subjective quality, but with Verdugo, that is the only way you can kill it. Or, once again, use over 200 rounds of ammo, so your choice. It's worth adding that in my first trip through 4-1, I didn't bring a rocket launcher and suffered immensely for my sins. You don't have to kill Verdugo, which I didn't initially, but making it to the elevator without wasting nearly all of your resources is pretty much impossible. So, 30,000 pitas on a rocket launcher it is. A boss that's only killable through a paywalled mechanic made for struggling players is, in my book, a fucking war crime. Suffering for playing the game without cheating is simply bad design, and Verdugo has zero redeeming qualities on top of that, an unbalanced mess that I utterly dread going through in every playthrough. The Chainsaw Ganados are the Resident Evil series' most famous mini-bosses. There are actually 3 variants of Ganados: the Chainsaw Man, Chainsaw Sisters, and a giant Chainsaw Man found exclusively in Mercenaries. No doubt, they're visually horrifying and pretty intense, but due to them being simply buffed and reskinned villagers, they fall to the bottom of the list. When you find Lord Sadler at the end of 5-3, he attempts to stop Leon and Ashley but is cut off by Ada. This boss fight is that cutscene, fought as Ada in the Separate Ways playthrough. Sadler's moveset is surprisingly complex, with a wide variety of supernatural lunges, swipes with plagas, avoidable punches, and quick-time dodges. The major positives Lord Sadler's pre-evolution fight have are that his movesets are well telegraphed and have a small, avoidable reach, a combination few bosses in the Resident Evil series can stake claim to. While challenging, Ada's crossbow puts Sadler down rather quickly, and as extra post-game content, in the grand scheme, this fight is just average. Did you play the Dark Side Chronicles? Nor did I, and because of this, Jack Krauser's large role in the endgame was confusing as shit. When RE4 came out in 2005, keep in mind that's 4 years before the Dark Side Chronicles, Krauser was just a randomly important character with apparently lots of history and no explanation or background given. Just a dude looking for a parasite who shows up a lot for some reason. Jack Krauser was one of Wesker's agents, and based on the dialogue in the cinematic, an old pal of Leon's, a fellow super soldier that you fight throughout Chapter 4. The main problem I have with Krauser is his limited moveset, with only 2 melee attacks and a lunge dash. For note, the fight I'm counting in this spot is the duel on the rooftop of the ruined building, as well as the fight from Mercenaries where you play as Ada and actually kill him. It's lame as shit that he doesn't die in the Leon fight in my opinion. Anyways, the reason I hold some high praise for Krauser is his susceptibility to speedrun tactics, which is also preventing him from being higher due to them working so well. As Leon, it's as simple as backing off when Krauser telegraphs his kick, then shivving him a couple times over, and as Ada, you can just shoot him in the legs until he jumps to the next platform, then do it again and again until he dies. Krauser is a cool character, but due to the lack of context surrounding him, is a mediocre boss overall. I'm always down for a sensory boss battle. I love the old hero from Demon's Souls, and this is essentially the same thing. Garadors are first encountered early in the castle, eyelids stitched and rabidly aggressive. They're blind and rely on sound, meaning you need to use tank controls to avoid being detected. Every Garador encounter, except for that fucking one, has a bell you can shoot to troll them, revealing the plagas on their back. 2 to 3 snipes from a high damage semi-auto rifle, and it's lights out. Well, it already was, but you get what I mean. Garadors are fun but simple, one-trick ponies built on an enjoyable mechanic. El Gigante is right up there with the Chainsaw Man as maybe the most well-known mini-boss in the Resident Evil series. It sounds weird, and is weird, but El Gigante is a massive troll but still somehow fits more into his respective world than the big booger one from the first Harry Potter. El Gigantes work as mindless damage sponges, hit them as much as you can and they'll topple over, revealing a plagas. There are 3 separate El Gigante encounters as Leon and 1 in Separate Ways, my favorite being the gank in the Nether with the trick door, one of the best individual sequences in RE4. Fun. Do not shoot the water unless you want the platinum. Del Lago, which translates to From the Lake, closes off Chapter 1 in style, the first major boss fight of Resident Evil 4. After hearing alien groans from the dark lake, Leon stops his motorboat and sends an anchor to the bottom, only for Del Lago to emerge, anchor attached to its backside. Your goal is to spearfish, tossing metal rods at Del Lago while it frantically swims around. The fight closes with the anchor falling off, leaving you hypothetically dead in the water. From here, you need to stab Del Lago in its mouth when it comes out of the lake. While Del Lago is cinematic and short, both ideal components for the makings of a good gimmick boss, it's also repetitive and has little evolution, making it alright overall. Holy shit, a Lovecraftian final boss in a Resident Evil game? If RE4 was my first in the series, this would have absolutely caught me off guard. But I'm a seasoned veteran, baby, and I wasn't just unsurprised, but expecting something along the lines of man or woman becomes amorphous cluster of teeth, eyeballs, and tits. What I wasn't expecting was the top quality Lord Sadler's final boss had, unlike every other finale in the Resident Evil series. Let's be honest, G5 sucks, Blob Nemesis sucks, Wesker sucks, House sucks, Evelyn really fucking sucks, and Tyrant and Miranda are, like, alright, I guess. Sadler, in my opinion, is an exception to this otherwise classless pile of dog shit. A spectacle and all the same, but with the quality in combat to back it up. In my opinion, his initial transformation is the scariest in the Resident Evil series, and his final form design is equally horrifying. Sadler has 4 limbs and a claw with a face, each with a weak point. The limbs take only 1 shot to knock out, and each time it leaves him open to damage. Alongside these limbs, there are a slew of environmental traps you can use on Sadler to temporarily stun him as well. Once you damage him enough, in a callback to RE2, Ada drops a rocket launcher from the high scaffolding of the oil rig in truly one of the best finishers in this series. A perfect ending to a great single-story antagonist and one of the best bosses in Resident Evil 4, no doubt. Now, what the hell is a U3? Well, it's a U3. I'm not sure what the U or the 3 mean, but it's a cool fucking name. U3 is most well known for being one of, if not the scariest boss fight in the Resident Evil series prior to RE7. Like, if you watch a well-researched horror boss compilation, U3 will always pop up eventually, to my point. But what makes this human-insect-parasite cocktail so terrifying? Well, for one, he's a human-insect parasite, but really the encounter has 2 distinct sections, an initial chase sequence, the heart of U3's horror, and a follow-up boss fight. The chase begins with the gargantuan parasite smashing through a rock wall, sending Leon into a storage container hanging over a large abyss. This container is split into 3 segments where you break shuttered barriers to get to lock mechanisms that open up the next segment, each designed as a maze. It's a great puzzle as is, but what makes it so scary is the randomly timed appearances U3 makes, and be it a quick time or a run-in down a long corridor, the bug is fucking horrifying in tight spaces, and this whole sequence capitalizes on that. The best solution for when U3 pops up is to simply damage him enough to where he goes away. Like a lot of games in this series, no dodge mechanic means evasion is a last resort. Once you reach the end of the 3rd container, U3 evolves, chasing you throughout the entire maze and falling to the pit below as Leon narrowly escapes. However, it scales the cliff wall and makes a surprising return shortly thereafter, leading to the fight. Like the other bosses, it's a damage sponge with an interesting arena design. U3 has a lot of health and a unique moveset, but with a well-upgraded TMP, it's nothing to cry home about. U3 is a great sequence in RE4's endgame, deserving of high praise, and then some. Who would have thought a little kid man dressed in medieval garb serving as a noble in the 2000s would be a prominent character in a Resident Evil game? Am I surprised that a little kid man dressed in medieval garb serving as a... well, you get it, and no, not really. What really surprises me is how many people I see rating Salazar as one of the worst bosses in the game, the majority of their complaints coming from him being one-shot by a rocket launcher. Once again, and you'd think this would go without saying, but I opted on not using that mechanic, and I mean, really, how is that a complaint? In my experience, so long as you don't cheat him, this Niño Lindo is one of Resident Evil 4's top dogs. From a visual point, Salazar is the best. His design is a clear guide on how he works mechanically, what to avoid, and what to attack, and each attack is telegraphed far in advance. His chomp does kill Leon automatically, however it only hits the center of the arena to my knowledge, and like the rest of his moves, can be avoided easily. Salazar has great arena design as well, featuring a top and bottom layer with items spread out and separate movesets based on where Leon is within it. While devoured by the giant mass, Salazar is still alive, just hidden behind a flesh wall. To get to him, you need to damage the creature's head, which after enough time keels over and opens up Salazar to damage. After a few cycles of this, he goes down, an epic conclusion to one of my favorite moments in Resident Evil 4. No surprises here, the number 1 fight in Resident Evil 4 by a landslide is Village Chief Vitores Mendez, one of my favorite bosses ever. Rarely does a fight that takes place in a collapsing, burning structure fail, begging the question, do climactic backgrounds make good bosses, or do good bosses allow for climactic backgrounds? I don't really know or give a shit, and I don't think that question even makes sense, but the point still stands. The village chief has by far the best atmosphere and tension of any fight in the game. While from the onset, Sadler was a teased antagonist, his longest appearance before, Chapter 4 was in a painting you can interact with. The true main antagonist of the early game is the village chief. Torres Mendez has a terrifying presence, being over 7 feet tall, with a horrifying voice and a distinct glass eye. When you find him at the back of the village in an abandoned warehouse, Mendez pretzels the building's door handles like Play-Doh and chokes Leon before he narrowly escapes, knocks over a gas canister, and kills the giant. Or so it seems. As following the explosion, the chief transforms from a human to a centipede-like mutant, beginning the fight. In the first phase, the chief awkwardly stumbles around and swipes at you with his claws. He moves and attacks pretty slow, so evasion isn't a problem, more knowing where you are as the chief is constantly rumbling towards you. After damaging him enough, his top slides off his legs, and, unable to stand, the chief begins to swing around from the support beams of the collapsing building like an orangutan. He rapidly swings from beam to beam and even changes elevation if you move up or down a ladder, attacking you when he gets in range. If you get lucky, you can knock him down for a brief moment, but overall, this is the scariest phase in the game in my opinion. Anticipating where he would swing gave me anxiety no other fight even came close to rivaling. Village Chief Mendez is by far Resident Evil 4's best boss fight, the pinnacle of arguably the best lineup in the entire series. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Remember to like and subscribe if you haven't, and leave a comment if you've got any opinions to share. That's all for now. Deuces.